Lawns became popular with the aristocracy in Northern Europe starting in the Middle Ages. Lawns soon became a status symbol and they were an element of wealthy estates. The damp climate of northwestern Europe made lawns possible to grow and manage. However, this is not the case for the majority of areas where grass is managed and irrigated around the world. In most parts of the country, lawns require large amounts of added fertilizer and water to survive. A 2005 NASA study estimates that more surface area is devoted to lawns than any other single irrigated crop in the country. About 200 gallons of fresh, usually drinking quality water per person per day would be required to keep up our nation's lawn surface area. So what can be done? Professor David Silver provides an alternative to front and backyard lawns.
Well, the reason I wanted to garden was because I think it's a lot more fun, first of all, than a lawn. And then second, I wanted food. I mean, I think that's the main reason. I really wanted food from the garden. But then also, when we moved here, we knew that we were having a baby, and so I wanted Sienna to have kind of direct access to food in the garden. And then fourth, it's just really fun and social. I love having a front yard garden so that, people stop and just hang out and talk.
Would you say that your garden is organic farming?
Entirely, 100%. I mean, there's no pesticides, there's no chemicals whatsoever in the garden, and then all of the soil, or about 90% of the soil, comes from compost that we make in the backyard. Yeah.
Would you say that was it more difficult to grow without pesticides?
No, I think it was much easier. I mean, I think our idea is that we want the soil to be as strong as possible and healthy as possible to make the plants as strong and healthy as possible to be able to defend themselves against pests and stuff. So there's no real need for pesticides, just kind of a watchful eye for slugs and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why do you think people use pesticides in their gardening and grass and stuff like that?
I think I don't know about grass. I still don't know why anyone would have a lawn. I have no idea. But I think that they think if I use pesticides, it will give me like a better shade of green or something, which I don't understand what that means. But I think that people have kind of got hoodwinked into this idea that pesticides will make their plants grow bigger, and the tomatoes will be juicier and larger and stuff like that. But I think in reality what they're doing is just adding dangerous chemicals to the plants, so that now you need to wash off your vegetables. But also, more importantly, the pesticides are going into the soil, and you're starting to really destroy the soil. Then you have to go buy other chemicals to modify your soil that you already destroyed.
Yeah.
And so what a lot of people are doing is just going back to kind of the ancient ways, whether you call it permaculture or organic gardening, and we're just going back and trying to make real soil to make real food. I believe this garden uses a lot less water than a traditional lawn. I think definitely, and definitely less pesticides. But I think the big difference is that people, including some of my neighbors, they use a lot of water for their lawns, but they don't get anything out of it. I use water for the garden and get peas, collards, kale, tomato, corn, celery, everything like that. So I think even if the water were the same amount, I'm getting a whole bunch of food and eating it.
Does your daughter like the garden?
Sienna loves the garden, and that's one of the funnest things, is that we knew that we wanted Sienna to be involved in the garden. We knew that, but we didn't know how attached she was. So sometimes, we'll be inside, and I'll look over her, I'll go, "You want to go to the garden?" And she just gets up, bolts to the door, and goes, "Garden, garden, garden," And so when we get out here, like right now, what you're seeing are these beautiful sugar peas, and she's learned to just go up to the pea, find a pea, and pull it off and eat it. And there's something, from a parent's point of view, there's something about seeing a young child eating food directly from plants that's just really heartwarming. And we know that it's healthy, but it's also just cool. And so the more that, and then what we've happened lately is Sienna, when she eats a lot of greens, whatever meal, she'll eat it and she'll look at me and she goes, "From the garden?" It's like, so she's starting to understand that food, or real food, comes from real plants. And I think that's something often missing in American culture and kind of contemporary culture.
Philosopher Immanuel Kant would say that it is our duty to others not to waste precious water and pollute the groundwater using dangerous fertilizers. As an individual, a quarter-acre lawn isn't a big ecological influence, but using Kant's categorical imperative, if everyone in the country had a quarter acre of lawn, as many do, it creates a serious ecological problem. The EPA estimates that nearly 70 million pounds of active pesticide ingredients are used on suburban lawns each year. Most lawns are composed of an introduced species not native to the area, which can further decrease a locale's biodiversity and vital habitats that support an ecosystem. In the US, 50 to 70% of residential water is used for landscaping, most of it to water lawns. So I guess the question is, do you really need that front lawn?